Welcome to Intelligent Think, the podcast in which we explore what makes ideas great, how we can make our thinking better, and why it's so important to share your ideas with the world. Plus, we'll talk to thought leaders and authors about their own ideas and experiences, so you can mine them for gold nuggets that will help you on your own journey. I'm Verity Craft.
And I'm Christina Wedgwood.
And this is Intelligent Think. And today we are chatting to the fabulous Tui Fleming, who is a leadership coach who works with executives, teams, and anyone who's navigating change or wants change. So the people who seek her are often juggling demanding lives, wrestling with a loud inner critic, or a level of anxiety that gets in the way of their potential. And they're focused on moving forward, but what they need is what Tui has coined stability before agility, a deep inner stability of self that allows you to trust through change, which I love that you put, Tui, that your kids say, Mum helps people believe in themselves, because that's such a fabulous way of summing it up. So Tui is also New Zealand's only certified Gallup Strengths leadership coach, who's also trained in narrative therapy, traumatic stress, and a registered yoga teacher. What a combo. I love this. And we are so excited to have you here today, Tui, to chat with us all about intuition and thinking and all the joy that you bring to your work. So thanks so much for coming on.
Oh my gosh, it's absolutely my pleasure, and I can't wait for the conversation.
Yay. Well, we wanted to chat today about kind of tapping into intuition and using your intuition as a thinking partner, which came about because you reached out to us after listening to our Thinking Partners episode. So talk to me a little bit about where that came from, what came to mind when we were having that conversation and you were listening to it.
Yeah. Well, I was walking on the beach, as I love to do while I'm listening to podcasts, and I had been meaning to listen to this for a while. So I put it in my ears and I was walking along the beach, and, you were talking about thinking partners and who you use and who you go to help you think and to help you go deeper, which prompted me to think, oh, well, who do I use? And I do have people, and I do have thinking partners that I love to chew the fat with. But really what came to me in that moment was, well, my thinking partner is me. I help myself think. But what part of me is that? And what came to me was it's really my intuition. And I thought of it as actually, well, is that a thinking partner, or actually is that a feeling partner? And that's where I reached out to you, Verity, and I said, oh my gosh, I loved that episode. It really got me thinking about how I think and who I think with. And have you considered that some people might not have an external thinking partner, but actually have an internal thinking, or you might call it a feeling partner? And we chatted and the conversation flowed, and here we are.
Love that. And see, sometimes when we do these interview episodes, we do them kind of solo with just the guest, but I felt like you had to be here for this one because
the penny has dropped as to exactly why I'm here. The feeling one, I guess.
The feeling one, but also I think it's really interesting. Not that I'm not the feeling one. No feelings here. I'm a robot. But I felt like definitely needed to be one that you were in on. So, Tui, talk to us about, like, what do you see your intuition as being? Like, what is intuition to you?
To me, and everyone will have their own definition, of course, but to me, intuition is about deep listening, and it requires presence. And, so many of us just don't have presence today. It's a loud, busy world out there. There are so many expectations on us. There's so much noise. But it's deep listening that requires presence and a remembrance of self that goes beyond and beneath all of those external expectations and all of that external noise, and beyond and beneath our own inner critic, which is of course always in there. And it's a level of deep listening that, yes, requires presence, but also it requires trust in what comes up and trusting what's there. And when you can really find that presence and trust in what is beyond and beneath all of that external noise, beyond and beneath your own inner critic, when you can really trust that, that's the pathway to hearing the whispers of your worth. That's what I love to call it, the whispers of your worth. And when you can really hear and know and feel your own self-worth, that's kind of the beginnings of the stirrings of your intuition and your inner voice that's always been there. I mean, our children have it. They're just so free and spontaneous, and they say what they think, and they've got no filter. And a lot of it doesn't make sense, and that's fine because they're young. But we have that inner voice. We've always had it. Just so many of us have forgotten it or just don't know how to access it.
So what tips, I guess, what can you give us to help us to do that more? Because I'm imagining that this deep listening and the presence that you're talking about, that requires some space. Like, you know, as I've got a lovely coach and client who reminds me often that we don't have our best ideas when we're rushing between meetings, for example. We need space for those to, I don't know, come in, download, whatever we're talking about here. So for those of us that, I guess, pride ourselves on our thinking brains, how do we start finding the space and the trust in our feeling brain, perhaps?
Yeah. You're 100% right. It's absolutely space. So many of my clients, when they come to see me, you know, they've rushed to see me and they're busy with so many thoughts, and they're still connected to their phone, and they're thinking about what's just happened, and they're thinking about what's about to happen. And I can't remember where this research comes from, but there's this fantastic statistic that I just cannot quite believe, but also can believe, that 47% of our waking hours are spent thinking about something other than what we're doing in the present moment. Whoa. So you're right, we need space, but before we get to the space, we need to have the awareness of what's keeping us busy, what's keeping us connected. There's this other fantastic piece of information that apparently we consume as much information in one day as our ancestors in the 15th century consumed in their lifetime.
That's staggering, right? No wonder we're tired.
Terrifying. Yes.
So if we need space, which we do need space in order to be present and to listen deeply and to trust what emerges, then we need to create that space. We need to first be aware of what we're allowing in. Like it's to some extent our choice and within our control to decide what we allow in and when. You know, is now the time to be fully connected, or actually is now the time that I'm going to switch off and I'm going to take a few deep breaths, and I'm not even going to have purpose for this time. I'm just going to allow myself to be and to absorb, you know, the bird song or the silence or just whatever, you know, but it's a choice that we have to create the space, and that comes before space, which comes before presence and listening.
Because I think we often, you know, when we talk about thinking partners, we often talk about getting a different perspective or, you know, opening up to new ideas and things. But I think what we often forget about when we're really busy and, you know, wanting to get feedback on an idea or wanting to move something along or wanting to get to the next place is like how much is inside of us and how much we don't trust ourselves to actually know the right thing. So I really liked when you kind of brought this topic to me, I liked the idea that we could explore, well, actually, like what are the pieces that we're missing out on by going out to external sources before we search inside ourselves, essentially.
Yeah. And we don't know what we're missing out on. We don't know what's in there until we disconnect, we create the space, we get present with ourselves and listen. And it can't actually be forced. And so whilst we're talking about, you know, disconnecting, create space to listen to your intuition, you might do all of that and just go, nothing's there. Nothing's there. Nothing's coming. And that's totally normal. What I've found over the years is that, and everyone and all of your people listening and all of your clients will probably know where they have their best ideas. And, lots of people say it's in the shower or wherever. But I know for me, it's outside in nature, specifically beaches. So I'll listen to podcasts, which is other people kind of, putting ideas in my thoughts, putting my ideas in my head. And then that then inspires and stimulates my own thinking and intuition. But I also know that some of my most profound intuition and ideas and writing comes to me in the middle of the night and first thing in the morning. So there's also an element of trial and error, kind of test out different places and times of the day as to when your thoughts emerge, those really intuitive thoughts, and an element of allowing. Just allow for the time, allow it to emerge. It's a very gentle, fluid process. It's not a forceful process.
So you can't go into it with too many, not that I'm speaking from experience here, but too many expectations. Can you really need a good idea by 5 o'clock, or I need to have an epiphany today because I've carved out today to have this epiphany. Yes, this is epiphany day.
Yeah.
Yes. I think lowering those expectations on it is part of the space or the quiet that you've got to create too, isn't it, to take the pressure off?
Yes, and you talked about lowering the expectations. Another way of thinking about it, and this comes from narrative therapy, is that sometimes when there's something really heavy or sticky, like an expectation, like the anxiety that might come from, getting it right, we can actually externalize that as an entity. So, for example, if we use expectations, you talked about, lowering or kind of dissolving or diluting the expectation, thinking of it as like that's an expectation that sits within us and we're going to kind of lower it. If you externalize expectations as an entity, you can then almost kind of see it as outside of yourself and get a little bit playful with it. And so a question I love to ask people, especially my clients, is, are you moving at a pace that suits the expectations or a pace that suits yourself?
Oh, God, that's...
You fell off your chair then, really.
I did nearly fall off my chair. That is a confronting question, and I love it.
Yeah, but when you externalize and you can kind of see it as separate to you and play with it, it doesn't feel heavy and burdensome and so hard to get kind of rid of or to dissolve or dilute, because it's not in you anymore. It's something that you're toying with, that you're playing with, that you're kind of seeing in a different way. And it makes it a lot more playful and light. And intuition loves to play. Intuition loves lightness. Yeah.
Far less combative too, when you have almost personified it as something else. You get to have a bit of distance from it that you can't have if it's inside.
I think the other element is we always judge ourselves way more than we judge other people. Like, I was thinking of that talking with my husband, and, he was getting stressed out. He's got jury duty next week and he was feeling like he's letting down the team, that he's not going to be at work and all this stuff. And I was like, you would never think that about one of the rest of your team. Like, you would never go, oh, they're letting me down because they have to go on jury duty. And then that we always judge ourselves more harshly than we judge other people. So I think also externalizing it then takes it away from, oh, well, actually, those are just a bit unrealistic expectations. Like, I wouldn't expect that as of somebody else. So why should they be thrown on me? I can see where that distance really helps.
And you, to your point, you wouldn't speak to your colleagues or others like that. You wouldn't say those things to others. You can think about, well, how would I speak to expectations? Would I be saying, actually, I really can't do that right now, or I can't deliver it by that time because I've got this, that, the other, whatever it is that you say. I mean, and sometimes we've got expectations and responsibilities that are hard, and, they are they are what they are, and we have to deliver. And that's the case in work, that's the case in families, but often there is flex. And so it's just taking that pause to kind of do that externalization and check in, is there some flex here, or do I have to really deliver? And oftentimes you'll find there is flex.
Tui, you mentioned earlier that when you're going really down deep, you're kind of getting past the doubt and all of that stuff. How do you, when you're working with people, how do you help them get past those layers? Like, there's a lot of self-doubt for people, or imposter syndrome, or things that make them not trust their own feelings or their own thoughts. How do you work past those feelings to then be able to really trust what's going on inside?
Yeah, there are a lot of ways that we can do that. There are a number of different pathways depending on who the client is, what the thoughts are. The first step for everyone, though, is to actually name that thought. So, a lot of people will say, I've got imposter syndrome, which is pathologizing something that is a natural human experience. So for a start, let's take away the word syndrome. Or I've got a really loud inner critic. So then we'll talk about that, and using that same externalization process, I'll say, okay, so when does that critic arise? In what situations and circumstances does it visit you? What kinds of things is it saying to you? And so we get really clear on the specific words or phrases or sentences. And then again, it's that playfulness. Sometimes I'll say, what's it tricking you into thinking? Or what's it tricking you into doing? So then it's like, oh, well, when I believe that thought, I act in this way, or I do this, that, the other. And then we talk about the trickery, like, is that okay with you or not okay with you? And then, well, actually, it's not really okay. I don't want that. So then what's an opposing thought that could be true, that could be possible? And so we go into, a big exploration mode, which is often linked to their strengths and their values and their desired feelings. So there's a lot of other things that we bring in these conversations. And then we get to a place where it's, if you believe these alternative thoughts, what does that make possible? And so when you start to look at what's possible, that's way more empowering and inspiring than what's holding you back. And it gives you reason to move beyond the blockage and beyond the stickiness that's holding you back. So there's a process, but what we bring in will depend on, who the person is and how deep we go.
Love that possibility. It relates quite a lot to, we've talked before about how, people will often put off writing a book, or will put off kind of building thought leadership until the kind of desire or the pull towards having that bigger impact, build whatever their goals are, like the desire to achieve that thing or to reach that impact level has to be higher than the fear of actually diving into it, or the fear of investing all this time and energy. And you need that pull, not just what's the problem that's going to push me towards it, but actually that pull towards something that you're excited about and those possibilities. That's when people actually take action as well.
And I heard somewhere this idea that hope is a verb, and I love that. It's not just thinking about the possibilities and hoping for them to happen. It's like, well, what can I do now, today and tomorrow and next week to actually, bring that possibility into reality? So, hope is a verb. I'm taking action to actually, realize my hopes and dreams.
Love that. That's that speaks to my soul. Tui, where, when we talked about thinking partners in that initial episode, we very much were talking about kind of other people and tapping into it. You yourself use your intuition as a thinking or feeling partner, but presumably also have other people. Where do you feel like are the places where you should tap into external thinking partners versus actually going internal?
Well, if I think about myself and how I use my intuition and then others, it's me first. It's my own presence, my own thoughts, my own intuition, whatever you want to call it, and feeling into that and trusting that that's emerged and that's speaking to me for a reason. It's part of who I am. And, we're energetic beings. We're made up of 30 trillion cells. We're literally energy walking. So if we can listen to ourselves first, and what's the energy that's arising and bubbling up, and what wants to be said and what wants to be heard, and then take that to a thinking partner. So I've been thinking about this, or this has emerged and this is arising in me. What do you think? And I think taking it to a thinking partner for me is about testing the idea. It's about testing the resonance of the idea. It is about inviting them to challenge me in my thinking, but that's not necessarily changing the energy of the idea. It might just be about the form and the shape that it takes in order for it to reach and land well with the audience that I'm intending it for, if that makes sense. So often I walk on the beach with some of my thinking partners and we'll just talk about, what's been coming up, what's been arising, and they will naturally just give me their thoughts, their feedback. One in particular can be quite challenging and it really makes me think. But when I'm thinking, I'm not drawn off to what she has said and going down her pathway. I'm kind of receiving what she said. Could be confronting, could be challenging. I hold it, and then again, kind of find that presence and kind of listen for the feel, like, how does my body respond to that? Like, do I like where she's taking me or not? Because if you don't like where a thinking partner is taking you, it's probably not aligned with your values, with your integrity, with who you are. And then that's not going to be very authentic when you bring it to the world. So I think it starts with me, then I take it externally to a thinking partner, then I come back to me and just test it out with how it lands.
You're almost filtering it through by the sounds of things in that layer. It's filtering it back through your feelings again, effectively.
Yeah.
And probably analyzing why you feel that way as well, right? Like there will be times where you feel uncomfortable because it's just uncomfortable to hear feedback that maybe is not that complimentary, and that's uncomfortable. Or am I uncomfortable because it's hitting up against a value or something that's really important to me, as you said?
Yeah. And also, as you were speaking, I think, one of the levels of discomfort is when my own inner critic will speak to me and say, oh, God, well, maybe our idea isn't so great because she's talking about X, Y, Z, and I hadn't really thought about that. And so it's about being careful to be really discerning between, is this just my inner critic speaking, which is actually a little character in my life who is just trying to protect me. And I can then speak to it and say, thank you so much for trying to protect me, but it's actually time for me to be bold and brave. And then park that goes to the side. Thank you, visitor. I've seen you, but you're not welcome through the door. What I'm inviting in are my deeper thoughts. And so, there's a lot of ways that it can kind of be confronting, but it's about it's about discerning where those thoughts and feelings are coming from.
I would like to give my inner critic a distinctive accent, I think, so that I can tell always that's what that one sounds like, versus me, who doesn't have that accent.
Which accent are you going for? See, I feel like we need an example now.
I don't know. Well, I don't know. Come back to me.
I love that. I have had
appropriation of something right now.
I've had many clients name their inner critic, but I've not had anyone talk about them having an accent. So that's a new one. I love that.
Well, just so you know, you can sort you can differentiate and sort them while you're listening, right?
Yeah.
And
Are you
like
doing here?
if you heard your inner critic with an accent, would you take it as seriously?
No, that's the other thing.
Exactly.
I think you've got to be, it's playful,
Yes.
like you said, you're giving it some playfulness.
Tell me
Isn't
how
it
that
funny
goes.
though? This again highlights though. I feel like we did this a few months ago in one of our podcast episodes where you discovered that I don't have a voice in my head. Like I don't have I've got feelings and like thoughts going through my head, but I don't have like a voice talking to me the same way. So like when you hear your inner critic, see, it's like a person talking to you, so it can have an accent. Whereas mine is more just like would just be a feeling, like or a thought. It doesn't feel like someone's talking to me. So.
Voices. I've got so many voices. That's why I need to be able to tell them apart.
Oh, I love that.
Amazing. So, Tui, you are an author. We were just talking before we jumped on this call about how your book came out about a month before Christina had her first baby. So she's fangirled over you for a long time, having read your book. And we obviously help people write their books. How did you, or how could somebody tap into their intuition during that book writing process, do you think?
Yes, great question. I didn't plan to write a book. I never thought of myself as an author or even a writer. It was a friend of mine who said, you've got so many thoughts about motherhood. You should write a book. And I was like, no, I'm not an author. I'm not a writer. But it was like the seed was planted. And I don't know if it was weeks or months later, I had gone back to work part-time. And I found myself, I can remember so clearly, I found myself in a cafe with my laptop, supposed to be doing work, but I had space away from the kids and space away from the office. And I don't know what my thought was at the time, but I remember kind of the feeling of just, what would I write if I did write something? What would I say if I did say something? And I just started typing and it just flowed. It was like the words just wanted to come out and they flowed, and that was the beginning. And I thought that I would just write musings on motherhood that I might just print at warehouse stationery and have bound and give to my children when they become mums one day. Literally, that's what I thought I was doing. But it took a life of its own, and I didn't think of it at the time as intuition. But what I was doing was I was only writing when I felt like writing. I had no preconceived notion as to what it should look like or what shape it should take or what structure it would have. I might come about it or approach it differently now. Having done a book, I can see the value of a lot of that. But I was led by my intuition. So I guess the answer is, again, creating space. When you feel that you want to write, allowing yourself to write, not judging what comes out, just let it flow, because there's always editing. And I feel like, and I know this is kind of a common phrase or belief out there, but often authors write the book that they need to hear. And I think that was true for me. Again, I didn't know it at the time, but I was writing as a way of making meaning out of how my motherhood and my, corporate career girl life was merging and coming together. And if I used to be a corporate marketer and now I'm a mum, what am I now? Who am I now? I'm deep in motherhood, but I'm returning to work. And I'm way more than mum, but I'm also way more than my corporate persona. It was really, who am I? It was a remembrance of self. And that's why the writing and the words just flowed, because it was very personal. So if anyone, wants to tap into that intuition or have more flow with their writing, I think, again, it comes down to those things we talked about at the beginning: presence, trust what comes up. Don't judge it. Don't attach to it. Just allow it to flow. Honor what comes up. because what comes up is the essence and the heart of you. And then if it's going to become a book, and if you're going to work with someone to edit it, you can tweak it and, make it perfect or good enough down the track. But first, trust what comes up and just allow it to be.
We talk a lot about doing an ugly draft first, where there's no judgment. It's just whatever comes out on the page. And we do recommend doing some planning beforehand so that it almost gives your intuition and gives your brain some direction, so that when you do sit down and just let that come out, you've got some direction. But it's the not trying to edit or judge before it's on the page. You can't edit a blank page. So it's that letting wherever the energy is, letting that come through you first, I think is always a great plan.
Yeah, we talk about putting your red pen away while you're writing. You can't have your editing hat on as well. But also I think why it's helpful to have a bit of coaching and support and stuff along the way is we talk lots about the resistance to, why is this bit not working? Why do I feel so shit about it? Why do I not even want to write that piece or whatever? And I think what we do, like our team does really well, is actually help people feel out why that isn't right. And maybe you don't need that bit, and maybe that's telling you something else. And I think, full disclosure, we struggle to say, oh, here's the framework, and we'll give you this really structured process for writing your book, because frankly, Faye's going to kick me under the table here, but we don't follow one. Like there is so much more scope in it to feel our way, and it's way more immersive the way that we do it than the market doesn't always want to hear that. But yeah, it is, because you've got to kind of trust the turns and the twists and the tricky parts, because there's messages and all of that. I think. And I think Dave in particular in our team, who does a lot of the coaching in our Better Book project, he's incredibly clever at tuning into and kind of hearing and helping others hear the messages. He knows where to push and where to back off, and that's in a way that we've never taught him to do.
But it sounds like even if you don't have an off-the-shelf framework, Dave and you and the team, you are the structure. You provide the structure. Like you let your writers and your authors, flow and, kind of, twist and turn. And then by challenging them and pulling them back, that is structure. That is giving them a framework, but it's through you and your listening and your coaching that you provide that.
I'll snip that bit, maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say, we'll just take that, Tui. Thanks.
Tui's inner marketer is coming out. Thank you. No, I think the other thing that came up for me when you were talking, Tui, was you said we write the book that we need to read. And it's incredible how many of our authors, when we go through the planning process with them, they're writing the book for them 5 years ago. Like we could majority of the time, there's like me before I knew this, or me when I was just starting out my career, or me when I was trying to work out what, when I was at this crossroads, or, that is their sort of target reader avatar, because they know that what they've been through, or the growth they had to do, or the experience they've had is resonant for others, or is felt by people that could also benefit from what they know. So I thought that was very true.
Yeah.
Love it. So Tui, what are the things that get in the way of people tapping into their intuition or using it as a thinking partner, and how do we overcome those things?
I mean, we've talked about some of them. Some of the things that get in the way are us being too busy and too connected. So that's like a very tangible, practical thing that we can actually choose to change. We look at our phones something like over 150 times a day. I mean, just put the phone away for an hour. That would be a start. That would help all of us.
He said something to me last night about, we were talking about who you'd ring in an emergency, and how it was prompted by you, Verity, and something you said yesterday about how our kids don't know how to do that still, because they don't really know how to use our phones, and they're of the age that they should be able to phone someone in an emergency. But anyway, it came back on me that he's like, you'd be a shit person to ring in an emergency because you don't respond or you don't answer your phone often. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm not going to say sorry for that, because I purposely divorce myself from it for spaces of time and for periods of the day. And I was like, it's not on my person, and I on purpose don't wear a device or a watch or something that's going to ping me and alert me either. So yes, that does make me a bit of a tricky person in an emergency, but also I'm like, I don't want it to be always there, so I can't look at it because I don't feel compelled to go upstairs and get it to look at it. So
that's great. So you are the role model.
No, not really. I'm definitely not on a pedestal with that, but I was like, I'm gonna take that shitness. Thanks.
The other thing that is far less tangible, that is very hard to just put away, is our emotions. And I'm not saying by any means that we need to disregard our emotions, but if we just talk about them for a minute, we know, because it's just been everywhere, that burnout is at an all-time high. And the World Health Organization included burnout in its most recent classification, International Classification of Diseases. And the precursor to burnout is emotional exhaustion. So I spoke to the author of the book, Burnout, Emily Nagoski, and she said that emotions are like tunnels. They have a beginning, middle, and an end. And it's when we get stuck in the middle of an emotion and we don't allow the energy of that emotion all the way out that we get stuck, and that the emotions scaffold and we move towards emotional exhaustion, which, as I said, is the precursor to burnout. So I think another thing that we can do, and it would benefit all of us, is to be more present and more aware of our emotions when they arise. And emotions are just episodic. They're automatic, they're spontaneous. They do just arise in the moment. And it's not always appropriate to move them all the way through that tunnel if you're in a meeting and you feel like crying, or if you're in a meeting and you feel like raging, or whatever it is. But what we can do is at the end of the day or the next day or the end of the week, we can come back and reflect on and relive to some extent that experience, to feel those feelings again and do something with them to move them out of our bodies, because the body keeps the score. Our bodies absolutely hold on to stuck emotions, and not only does it lead to burnout, but also that's where trauma starts to kind of form in our bodies. That's where dis-ease and injury and things like that can happen. And if our bodies are full and sticky with a whole lot of emotions that have not been processed, then there's no energetic space in our body and in our mind, again, for that deep thinking, that presence, that trusting of what comes up. So yes, we can disconnect from our devices. Easier said than done, but also there's a whole lot of work to be done around our emotions.
So you there's creating external space, but there's also that's sort of the internal space, isn't it? If we're all clogged up by all the things that are still stuck halfway through the tunnel.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
I find it really interesting how that's something that we don't necessarily do for ourselves, but I would say like our generation of parents certainly are trying to do for our kids. Like I went to a night at the daycare the other night where they invited parents along to hear an expert talk about emotional regulation and how you can support kids through tantrums and things like that. And a big piece of it was accepting the emotion when it's happening and like recognizing it and being there for them. But then once they've calmed down, naming the emotion, talking about what happened, talking about how it felt, and letting it kind of continue and closing that loop. And it's kind of what you said. It's like they're not holding it in there, but actually making that process finish. And I think it's really interesting that like we're now, learning how to do that for our kids, but often we don't give ourselves the same
so the reparenting, isn't it?
Yeah. Definitely reparenting.
Yeah. You're 100% right. That's why most of my clients are adults.
Yeah.
But it did make me think about what you were mentioning earlier, Verity, about so Christina having, all the thoughts in your head and a very clear inner critic who's going to have an accent, and Verity, you don't really have a voice in your head at all, but you kind of feel more. So I wonder if ever you experience the feeling of resistance or hesitation or uncertainty, it's not necessarily an inner critic or this imposter syndrome, but it's a feeling that equates to the same kind of messaging that a vocal inner critic might give you. So for you and others like you, it's the emotional naming and the emotional processing, maybe more so than the externalizing of that inner critic and visitor, that's going to be really powerful for you.
Yeah, I think so. Because when you talk about, externalizing the inner critic, I'm like, I don't even know how I do that. Like, I can't even recognize the inner critic. But there's certainly, I still experience feelings of like self-doubt and, not belonging and stuff. So I've never really related to the term like inner critic or imposter syndrome. I've never felt like I've had it. But actually, when you've just said that, I'm like, oh, I've still got all the feelings. It's just that they're not necessarily, it's not like somebody talking to me in my head. So yeah, that's a really great point.
And natural empaths and people who, I'm obviously a strengths-based leadership coach, and funnily enough, a lot of people that come to me happen to have empathy in their top 5. It's like they just naturally make their way to me. So I know a lot about people who are natural empaths and have empathy as a talent. They are feelers more so than thinkers. They can, really feel what's going on, and then they'll put words to that, versus the thinkers who think about what's going on and then start to embody and feel it. So it's not either or, and we're all both to some extent. But if you are really strongly empathetic and empathic, it's likely that you are, and that's why you feel faster. Not faster than you think. I know you're a fabulous thinker, but you know what I'm trying to say. The feelings arise fast, and then you put words to it.
Interesting. So cool. Well, I think we've just about come to the end of our time with you, but this has been so fabulous. See, do you have any other burning questions for Tui? Because I know you've been fangirling over her for a while.
I feel like I could talk to her for ages too, and just want to like soak in all the things she knows. Let me think.
Shouldn't have thrown you on the spot. I do the fantasy.
Me a of warning. No, honestly, no.
That's all good. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Tui. This has been such a joy, and I feel like I've just soaked up all the wisdom, which is nice.
I love it. It's such a pleasure, and I'm grateful that you invited me. It's a moment where I can, allow thoughts and that intuition to arise as you ask questions. So just even in this moment, in this time together, although, hopefully I'm sharing that wisdom and imparting the knowledge, I've said things in new ways that I haven't said before, and that's just bubbled up and emerged. So it's a lovely opportunity for me to sit in that. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, you have been listening to Intelligent Think with Verity and Christina Wedgwood, brought to you by Intelligent Inc. Thanks to our guest Tui Fleming, Jeff Ong for our theme music, and to you for listening. Don't forget to leave us a review if you liked what you heard, and here's to better thinking together.